Well, the waiting is over, and the live-action version of The Little Mermaid is part of our world. What hidden details and little nods did they hide under the sea? We gotcha. Come along and kiss if, like, the girl was an Easter egg and you'd kiss... Just put up the first entry. Which turns out to be a girl. Or, more specifically, a woman who once played the voice of a girl. The Little Mermaid marked a return to form for Disney when it was released in 1989. It was such a dynamic turnaround that it became known as the Disney Renaissance. That meant that they were still a few movies away from using star power for the voice acting, and instead getting them from musical theater.
The theater. What's happened to the theater?
The same place they got their composer, Alan Menken. More on him later. That meant that the mermaid with a bad case of wanderlust was voiced by Broadway actress Jodi Benson, who had just performed a song called Disneyland in the musical Smile that was written by the Little Mermaid lyricist Howard Ashman. For the animated film, Benson only had one song before going mute for the last half of the movie, but she really made the best of it. Benson makes a brief appearance in the live-action movie as a vendor at the bazaar that hands Ariel some food with what Ariel assumes is a dingle hopper. You know, for styling your hair. The animated version of The Little Mermaid takes place in an ocean near some country. One with a prince who likes to sail and has wild birthday parties on ships complete with a fireworks display. The only thing that seemed to have a distinct locale was Sebastian the Crab, with a Jamaican accent and Caribbean flavor to his songs. It was Sebastian's accent and musical taste that led to the decision to be more specific about where the story takes place. The live action trades in somewhere to a slightly less vague somewhere in the Caribbean setting. The unnamed country remains unnamed, and the various seas are alluded to by Ariel and her sisters. The filming location, however, is Sardinia, just off the coast of Italy. The tiny island has been the place to be for well-dressed action stars like James Bond in The Spy Who Loved Me. That's the one where a lotus turns into a submarine. This wasn't an unusual experience for director Rob Marshall. Not only was this not his first Disney movie, it was not his first Disney movie set in the Caribbean. Wait, we can go even further. This wasn't his first Disney movie set in the Caribbean with mermaids. This wasn't even his first Disney movie set in the Caribbean with multi-ethnic mermaids. Not even his... No, wait, that's it. Rob Marshall also directed Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which included, among other things, mermaids. Though the mermaids in that one were the kind of mermaids Eric's friends and family were afraid of. Way more bitey. With the Caribbean setting comes another layer that the live-action movie adds to the original. While Ariel's adventure in the shipwreck was practically shot for shot from the animated movie, there was a key difference. There were a bunch of them. Later, we hear that the sea gods hate that island in particular, and that a surface dweller was the cause of Ariel's mom's passing. No one in the movie ever puts those two pieces together, so both the mermaids and the humans don't entirely know what the other one is fighting for. But the ship graveyard, Triton's lack of favor, and the location being in the Caribbean implies that the graveyard of ships where Ariel gets her collection is the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, of course, is either the area covered between San Juan, Puerto Rico, Miami, and Bermuda, or wherever the border needs to be to include the mystery disappearance you want to be part of the Bermuda Triangle legend as a place where ships and airplanes mysteriously vanish. While the phenomenon of the Bermuda Triangle didn't come about until a 1950 article in the Miami Herald by, and this name is fantastic, Edward Van Winkle Jones, the idea of the Bermuda Triangle has since permeated the culture.
Wednesday adores the Bermuda Triangle. She studies it. Death at sea. She's hooked.
Ask me anything.
In The Little Mermaid, it's implied that the triangle is that way because King Triton has a grudge. Not every song from the original made it into the live-action adaptation, including Daughters of Triton. In the animated version, the king apparently liked to have his daughters perform elaborate Bubsy Berkeley-style numbers that handily tell us all the names of Ariel's 6 other sisters, but also that little sis's head is somewhere else. Specifically, salvaging trinkets from sunken ships. The previous movie had a naming convention that had all the names starting and ending with A, except Ariel. The new names only all end in A, except again with Ariel. By the 7th child, you're just naming them after the first thing you see out the window. For the live-action adaptation, the sisters are Perla, played by Lorena Andrea, who also plays Lilith in Warrior Nun. Indira is played by Bridgerton's Simone Ashley. Kaisa Mohammer plays Karina. Pink-haired Caspia is portrayed by Natalie Sorrell. Mala is portrayed by Carolina Conchette. Sienna King rounds out the sisters in the role of Tamika. As in the animated version, the sisters don't play a big role, this time not even getting a song. That's what makes Ariel's absence so important. The coral moon is one of the few times the sisters are together. While the animated version of The Little Mermaid left us to put together the pieces to see that the seven sisters represent the seven seas, the current adaptation leans all the way into that idea. Not only with the tie-in novels explaining the roles of the daughters of Triton once they turn 15, but also in their look, specifically the fishy part. Costume designer Colleen Atwood not only had the task of coming up with all the above-water costumes, but also in designing the fishy bits for the various sisters. Each one was given a tail configuration and scale coloring inspired by the different fish from different parts of the ocean. She also ditched the animated Ariel's shell top. She told Bazaar, "Having them all plonk seashells on their breasts seemed like a weird way to go. And when you start putting shells on real bodies, it's hard to make them look good, believe me. You're gonna put the next seashell you see on you somewhere just to see, aren't you?" Yeah, me too. It's too bad there's an already sinister meaning to the term slipping them a Mickey.
I'm gonna slip him a Mickey.
Because otherwise, it would be a perfect term to describe Disney sneaking in secret Mickey Mouse heads into their theme parks and movies. Specifically, the three circles symbol that has come to identify Disney and its mascot, Mickey Mouse. Little Mermaid production designer John Meyer got in on that game as well. There's a Mickey hidden in the tile of Prince Eric's castle, and 3 rocks are arranged into a Mickey on the beach. According to DisneyDiner.com, there were rope formations in the shape of a Mickey that took the crew a week to discover. I've said Mickey enough times that "Hey Mickey" is starting to get into my head. Ugh! Move on to the next one before it takes root. It's hard to imagine Disney at this point as anything other than the culture-dominating behemoth that it is today. But there was a moment in time where it seemed that Disney had lost its way. Primarily, they weren't putting out those animated features that would become enduring classics. Former Disney animator Don Bluth had struck out on his own and was making a credible go at taking over the animated feature world. But that was before Disney hired Little Shop of Horrors composer Alan Menken and adapted a Hans Christian Andersen story. The Little Mermaid marked the beginning of the Disney Renaissance. Sticking with what works, Menken was heavily involved in writing music for most of the movies during that era, and Newsies that got a re-evaluation in the last few years. Who knew? Alan Menken returned for the live-action adaptation, helping adjust the songs and add new music. Joining him was a growing Disney composing alum, Lin-Manuel Miranda. The Hamilton composer has contributed to Moana, Encanto, and Mary Poppins Returns. Producer John DeLuca praised the collaboration in an interview with Screen Rant, saying, "When we wrote our first draft, we would decide where the new song should be, and then we came out with a template. We said, this is what it should be. This is what we want it to say for the story." And they just embraced it. And they just said, "More and more, just give us more." And it was that true collaboration as if they'd never done anything of merit. So that's the best way to work. Melissa McCarthy has established a reputation as a comedic actor and even established dramatic cred in movies like Can You Ever Forgive Me? But one thing she hadn't done is sing. The Masked Singer hasn't gotten to everyone, yet. To get her up to speed, she sought help from vocal coach to the stars Eric Vetro. In an interview with The Wrap, she credited Vetro with getting over her focus on singing the song precisely instead of singing the song as Ursula. That didn't mean she was immediately ready to be put on the spot. Talking to Screen Rant, she revealed that Menken and Miranda visited on the first day of rehearsals offering to sit in. McCarthy says that they weren't able to even get the question out before she said no. She was not ready to face 2 composers she admired performing such an iconic song. One person who maybe didn't have to work so hard on his singing voice was Javier Bardem, whose King Triton didn't have a musical number. Didn't have a musical number in the theatrical cut, that is. There was a song that was written and shot for the Sea King that outlined both his trepidation about his Wanderlust daughter and his distrust of the people on the surface. Ultimately, the song was cut in the interest of narrative flow, but Bardem also believed that it might have made Triton's decision to let his daughter live on land with the people harder to achieve, as the song put him much further away from being able to accept or trust the people on the surface. If you're curious as to what the song sounds like, all you need is a little patience, as the song is set to be part of the online and at-home release. You always gotta save something for the special editions. The song joins Les Poissons, the suspiciously Be Our Guest sounding song sung by the chef trying to cook Sebastian. For that, they felt it didn't advance the story that was already expanding beyond the 2-hour mark. While Disney's version of The Little Mermaid has become the default definitive version, it's ultimately one of many adaptations of the almost 100-year-old story, and there was almost one more. Talking on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Elle Fanning talked about a version by director Joe Wright for Working Title Pictures that would have had her cast as Ariel. She characterized it as the turns into sea foam version of the story, referring to the original's darker tone. In the original story, merfolk live to around 300 years old, but do not get an afterlife. Instead, they dissolve into sea foam. This was Ariel's ultimate fate in the original story, but she gets a last-minute out in that she becomes a spirit of the air, thus having her name make way more sense. While the film never took off, likely due to the cost of the newly created underwater filming technique, all wasn't lost, as the technique was used to film the mermaid sequences in the movie Pan. In the animated version of the story, Ariel is 16 years old and gives up her legs for her first crush. I've been someone's first crush at 16. There's a pretty good chance she's gonna end up wanting those legs back. My high school girlfriend didn't even make it to fall.